Title: The HOA Conspiracy. Nathan Collins stared at the HOA violation notice in his hands, his brow furrowing deeper with each word. Unauthorized barbecue activity. $500 fine for grilling without HOA approval. His first thought? They had to be joking. His second? Wait, whose backyard? Nathan didn't own a backyard. Hell, he didn't even own a house. He rented a small apartment in the city, miles away from any HOA-controlled suburb. So how the hell was he being fined for breaking rules on a property he didn't even know existed? Determined to fix what was obviously a clerical error, Nathan dialed the HOA office number listed on the notice. A woman's voice, as cheery as a snake oil salesman, answered. Lancaster Property Management, how can I assist you? Yeah, hi. I think there's been a mistake. I got a fine for grilling in a backyard, but I don't own any property here. The woman chuckled, the sound grating against his nerves. Oh, Mr. Collins, there's no mistake. The property at 127 Birchwood Drive is registered under your name. Nathan's stomach flipped. 127 Birchwood Drive? That name sparked something, distant, foggy. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. There's no way. I rent an apartment. I don't even. Sir, she interrupted with the tone of someone explaining algebra to a toddler. We have the deed on file. If you'd like to dispute it, you'll need to come in person. Nathan's world tilted. There had to be a mistake. Or a scam. Because if the HOA was telling the truth, he owned a house he had no idea existed. 30 minutes later, Nathan stormed into the HOA office, gripping the violation notice like a weapon. The receptionist, a pinched-faced woman in her 50s, barely looked up before handing him a thick folder. Per request, she said, her lips curling into a smirk. Your property records. Nathan hesitated before opening it. He had been so sure this was a mistake. But when he flipped through the documents, his own name was right there, clear as day, under the title deed for 127 Birchwood Drive. And then he saw it, the name of the previous owner. His breath caught in his throat. Robert Collins. His grandfather. Nathan's mind scrambled to connect the dots. Grandpa Robert died 2 years ago. The family had gone through the usual estate process, but no one had ever mentioned a house. There had been no legal paperwork, no estate lawyer involved. Just some old furniture and sentimental trinkets. His pulse quickened. Why hadn't anyone told him? And why was the HOA so quick to slap him with a fine when they had clearly known about this property before he did? Why wasn't I informed about this? He asked, his voice tight. The receptionist shrugged. That's a question for your family, not us. None of this made sense. Had his family kept this from him? Or was something bigger at play? Nathan needed answers. And he knew exactly where to start. Nathan drove straight to Birchwood Drive, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. When he pulled up to the address, an eerie sense of déjà vu washed over him. The house was modest but well-kept, a charming blue-painted bungalow with a white picket fence. The kind of home his grandfather would have loved. The kind of home he had visited as a kid. Stepping out of the car, he walked to the front door and tested the key that had come with the folder. It slid in smoothly, unlocking the door with an unsettling ease. Inside, everything was untouched, as if frozen in time. Framed photos of his childhood still hung on the walls. His grandfather's old record player sat in the corner, gathering dust. The faint scent of pipe tobacco still lingered in the air. But something was off. Nathan moved through the house slowly, taking in the untouched furniture, the carefully arranged trinkets, and the coat still hanging by the door. It was as if his grandfather had left one day and never returned. Then he noticed something odd in the paperwork he had brought with him. A property transfer attempt had been made right after Grandpa Robert's death. But it wasn't signed by Nathan. Someone had tried to take the house from him. Nathan's pulse thundered. The HOA knew about the property. They knew it belonged to him. And they had been hoping he'd never find out. That fine. It wasn't about grilling. It was a test. They wanted to see if he would fight back. And now, they had just made a mistake. Nathan wasn't the kind of guy to roll over. Nathan sat at the old kitchen table, the pile of documents spread out in front of him. He barely had time to process the fact that he owned a house, let alone that someone had tried to steal it from him. His mind raced. Who had tried to claim his grandfather's property? And why had the HOA kept this quiet until now? His first instinct was to call his mother, but he already knew what she would say. Just leave it alone, Nathan. Don't stir up trouble. She hated confrontation. But Nathan? He wasn't wired that way. The HOA wasn't just being overzealous with their fines. They had been actively trying to erase his ownership, which meant they had something to gain. Nathan needed answers. And there was only one place to start: the people who had lived on Birchwood Drive long enough to know what was really going on. The next morning, he knocked on the door of Mr. Daniels, an older man who had lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years. The door creaked open, and a pair of sharp eyes peered out at him. "I'm not buying anything," the man grumbled. "I'm not selling anything," Nathan said quickly. My grandfather was Robert Collins." The old man's face softened immediately. "Robert? Good man." He opened the door wider. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled of old books and strong coffee. Mr. Daniels waved Nathan toward a chair and settled across from him. "So, what's this about?" the old man asked. Nathan hesitated, then pulled out the HOA fine and slid it across the table. "They fined me for a barbecue, but I didn't even know I owned this house until yesterday." Mr. Daniels picked up the paper, frowning. Then he sighed. "Let me guess, they've been misplacing your records too?" Nathan straightened. "What do you mean?" The old man shook his head. "Son, the HOA's been pulling this kind of thing for years. They prey on houses with no clear heirs. People die, families move away, paperwork gets lost, and suddenly, the HOA claims the property, sells it, and pockets the money." Nathan's stomach clenched. How do they even get away with that? They forge documents, change ownership records, make up debts the homeowner supposedly owes, then foreclose when they can't pay. Mr. Daniels leaned forward. "It's a racket. They tried it with me last year, said I had unpaid dues when I've never missed a payment in my life." "What happened?" Mr. Daniels smirked. "I fought them. Scared him off. But most folks, they don't have the time or money to go to court." Nathan sat back, his mind racing. If what Mr. Daniels was saying was true, then the HOA was systematically stealing houses. And that meant his grandfather's house wasn't just some fluke. It was a target. Nathan left Mr. Daniels' house with his head spinning. The HOA wasn't just a group of overzealous rule enforcers. They were running a scam. If they had targeted his grandfather's house, how many other families had they done this to? He needed proof. Real proof. Something that could expose them beyond any reasonable doubt. Back at his grandfather's house, Nathan sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the deed, HOA policies, and the suspicious property transfer attempt. One name kept appearing in the documents: Margaret Lancaster. Margaret was the head of Lancaster Property Management, the firm overseeing the HOA. She had signed off on numerous property transfers, many of which looked questionable at best. Nathan ran a quick online search and found a slew of complaints against her company: unfair fines, forced evictions, and properties mysteriously changing ownership. Bingo! Nathan grabbed his phone and dialed the number listed under Lancaster Property Management. "Lancaster Property Management, how can I assist you?" A crisp voice answered. "I need to speak to Margaret Lancaster." "MS. Lancaster doesn't take direct calls. Can I take a message?" Nathan clenched his jaw. "Yeah. Tell her the owner of 127 Birchwood Drive has some questions about fraudulent property transfers." There was a brief pause on the line. Then, the woman's voice stiffened. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't know what you're referring to. But if you have concerns, I suggest you attend the next HOA board meeting." Nathan smirked. "Oh, I plan to." The following Thursday, Nathan walked into the HOA meeting held at the neighborhood clubhouse. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant. Around a long table sat a group of middle-aged board members, each looking just as rigid and unapproachable as he expected. At the head of the table sat Margaret Lancaster, sharp-eyed, perfectly dressed, and oozing condescending authority. "Mr. Collins," she greeted, barely masking her irritation. "How can we help you?" Nathan set his folder of documents on the table. "You can start by explaining why someone tried to transfer my grandfather's house out of my name right after he died." A murmur spread through the room. Margaret's expression remained neutral. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Nathan pulled out the transfer documents and slid them across the table. These forms were submitted to the county, attempting to change ownership of 127 Birchwood Drive. But my signature isn't on them. "So tell me, who signed it?" Margaret barely glanced at the papers. "I'm afraid I can't discuss individual property matters. If you have legal concerns, you're welcome to file a complaint." Nathan chuckled. shaking his head. Oh, I will. And I'll also be forwarding these to an attorney. Margaret's lip twitched. For the first time, she looked rattled. Nathan wasn't done. One more thing. Why did I only find out about this house because of a barbecue fine? If I legally owned the property, why wasn't I notified before? Silence. Margaret steepled her fingers. I assure you, Mr. Collins, everything was handled according to HOA policy. Nathan leaned in. Then why do I have a stack of other complaints from homeowners saying otherwise? Another murmur. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Margaret's smile faltered. I think we're done here. Nathan grinned. Not even close. Nathan had rattled the HOA, but he knew that wasn't enough. If he wanted to expose them, he needed more dirt. That night, he did something he hadn't done since college. He broke into a filing cabinet. Well, not literally. But he did the next best thing. He charmed his way into a conversation with Claire Matthews, a former HOA employee who had left under mysterious circumstances. They're criminals, Claire whispered over coffee. I quit because I couldn't stomach it anymore. They manufacture violations to fine people into foreclosure. They pocket the money. Then they sell the houses under the table. Nathan exhaled sharply. And Margaret Lancaster runs it all? Claire nodded. She doesn't get her hands dirty, but she approves everything. Nathan took a sip of his coffee, his mind racing. I need proof. Something undeniable. Claire hesitated, then pulled out a USB drive. This has emails. Internal memos. Fraudulent charges they used on homeowners. You didn't get it from me. Nathan took the drive, a grin spreading across his face. Claire, you just became my favorite person. Nathan now had enough evidence to ruin Lancaster Property Management. But he didn't just want to expose them. He wanted to set a trap. First, he leaked small portions of the documents to local news outlets. Enough to spark public outrage, but not enough for the HOA to realize how deep he had dug. Then, he sent an anonymous email to Margaret Lancaster. I know what you did. I have the proof. Let's talk before it goes public. The bait was set. A day later, Margaret herself called Nathan. Meet me at the clubhouse, she said coolly. Let's discuss this like adults. Nathan smirked. See you there. Nathan walked into the clubhouse with a hidden recording device in his pocket. Margaret sat across from him, her polished demeanor cracking just slightly. What do you want, Mr. Collins? Nathan placed a printed email on the table. I want an explanation. Why did you try to steal my house? Margaret exhaled through her nose. That was a clerical error. Nathan pulled out another document. And this? The fake fines you issued to homeowners until they couldn't pay their mortgage. Margaret's fingers twitched. You don't understand how this works. Nathan cut her off. Oh, I understand perfectly. I understand that you've been running an organized scam, and now you've been caught. Margaret's jaw clenched. What do you want? Money? A deal? Nathan leaned forward. No. I want you to burn. Then, he pressed play on his hidden recorder, letting her own words seal her fate. Within 24 hours, the story hit the news. HOA fraud scandal exposed. Homeowners speak out. The city opened an official investigation into Lancaster Property Management. Margaret resigned in disgrace, but it was too late. She was already under criminal investigation. The HOA collapsed overnight. Homeowners sued. Stolen properties were returned. And as for Nathan, he won. Standing in his grandfather's backyard, he fired up the same grill that started it all. And this time, no one could fine him for it. The fallout from the HOA scandal sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, but Nathan knew it wasn't over yet. The city's investigation was just getting started, and lawsuits were beginning to pile up against Lancaster Property Management. But Margaret Lancaster was a seasoned manipulator. Nathan doubted she would go down without a fight. And he was right. One morning, an envelope arrived at his doorstep, bearing the unmistakable stamp of a law firm. Inside was a legal notice. Margaret was suing him for defamation and illegally obtained recordings. She claimed he had fabricated evidence, that he was harassing her, and that his accusations had caused her emotional distress and loss of business. Nathan exhaled sharply, fighting back laughter. Unbelievable. He immediately called Claire Matthews, the former HOA employee who had helped him. Margaret just sued me. Claire scoffed. She's desperate. She knows she's screwed, so now she's trying to flip the script. I need a lawyer. A damn good one. Claire paused. I think I know just the guy. That afternoon, Nathan met Ethan Reynolds, a high-powered attorney with a reputation for crushing corrupt corporations. Ethan flipped through the lawsuit papers, shaking his head. Margaret is trying to play a fence, hoping to scare you into silence. But she's got no real case. The evidence you collected is solid. Plus, she was dumb enough to admit to everything on tape. Nathan smirked. So we countersue? Ethan grinned. Not just that. We bury her. I'm filing a motion to dismiss, followed by a defamation suit against her for trying to silence a whistleblower. If she wants war, we'll give her war. Nathan nodded. Let's do it. As the lawsuit dragged on, Margaret's desperation became apparent. News reports surfaced about her trying to liquidate her assets before the courts could seize them. Then came the threats. Nathan started receiving anonymous letters. Drop the case, or else. His tires were slashed one morning. His mailbox was vandalized with the words, "Stay quiet," spray painted across it. Nathan took photos and forwarded everything to Ethan. They're getting desperate, Ethan said. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes. Nathan wasn't scared. He was angry, and he was done playing defense. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was packed, not just with lawyers and officials, but with homeowners who had been wronged by Lancaster Property Management. Margaret's attorney was a slick corporate man who tried to spin everything as a misunderstanding. Ethan wasn't having it. Misunderstanding? Ethan scoffed. Let's review the emails, fraudulent fines, and illegal foreclosures orchestrated by your client. The final blow came when Claire Matthews testified. She confirmed that Margaret had knowingly signed off on fraudulent property transfers. The jury took less than an hour to deliberate. Verdict: guilty of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Nathan sat back, exhaling in relief as Margaret's face drained of color. The judge ordered millions in damages to the victims. Lancaster Property Management was officially dissolved. Margaret? She was facing prison time. With the HOA destroyed, Nathan and the other homeowners finally took control of their neighborhood. 1 year later, Nathan hosted a barbecue in his backyard, the same backyard that started it all. Mr. Daniels, Claire, and Ethan clinked their beers together. To take down corruption, Ethan toasted. Nathan grinned. And to never pay another HOA fine again. As the sun set, Nathan looked around at the community he had saved. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace.